and welcome to IBM Bi-Weekly, a podcast focused on the technical aspects of the IBM I operating system and the community surrounding it. My name is Josh, and with me is co-host Liam. Today is the 22nd of April, 2019, and we have episode 5, IBM I hardware and the system administration in store for you. The episode topic today will be speaking with Steve Pitcher. We'll cover hardware and system administration. Pretty straightforward. With that, we can jump into the sponsorship spotlight.
All right, well, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Omni User Group in Chicago at omniuser.org. Omni meets every third Tuesday in the Chicago area, and you can check the website for their upcoming speakers and dinner meetings. Again, that's omniuser.org, O-M-N-I user.org.
Awesome. Not much news. Really, all we have is what Steve Pitcher told us about, which is he's going to have what's the title? I guess Rapid Fire Admin is the title.
Yep.
It's 150 admin tips in 50 minutes. He's going to tease about that in the episode too. That's going to be April 24th of this month. So actually, when's this? This is released. So it's like 3 days after this podcast. Yep. So make sure you get out there and watch it. Yep. Guess with that, we can jump into the discussion.
Yes.
Hi, welcome to the show, Steve. You work at iTech Solutions Group. While avoiding marketing shout out and everything, can you just inform us of what iTech Solution does and what you do at iTech Solution?
Well, we do. I'll try to get my marketing hat off as best I can. What we do is primarily IBM I administration. We do a lot of OS upgrades. Last year we did about 400 actually, and we've got 6 techs total, I think. And so we were all busy trying to get people off of 7.1 and up to 7.3 for the most part. We do a lot of hardware upgrades as well, and for the last few months, it's been kind of raining Power 9s, which is it's good. People are moving to newer iron, and that's always good to see. So yeah, that's kind of iTech in a very, very much boiled down description, I suppose.
Okay, and what do you do there?
Well, I kind of have a hybrid role. I'm based in Canada. I'm the only Canadian at iTech, so I kind of trudge around the countryside here, going from shop to shop, doing sales work, and I do technical work as well. So like to think 50-50. It seems like 70-70 most days. But it's good fun. You get to do some sales stuff, and then you get to get on the system and, slip the lick for somebody and bring them up 8 years in PTFs. That's always real fun.
All right.
So you've said sales, but you've also said technical. So what is your true background, and what is your true background, and where does IBM I come into that?
True background. Well, I guess I spent about 17 years in manufacturing, doing everything from RPG programming to domino development. I've had just about every job you can think of, from entry-level programmer to IT director and everything between. So I'm trained as an RPG programmer. I went to college for a couple of years and did a program in RPG 3, which really, really, really helped me out in the real world. More than I'd like to admit, actually. It's the first shop I ever went to work for. I had a ton of older code, and I was learning freeform at the time, and managed to kind of school myself and bring some of the older programs into a readable format. Lowercase is really friendly. They don't tell you that in college. So yeah, that's kind of my background, I suppose. Where does IBM fit in now, or IBM I fit in with that? I suppose I work on it every day. I have for close to 20 years now, and I just love it. It's a fantastic operating system, and it's been really good to me, and I try to be as good to it as I possibly can as well. Doing promotion and volunteer work with Common and uh, goodness, anything I can to wave the flag is always a good thing.
Yeah, there's a list. There's a big list I know you're part of. So,
All right. So I feel like hardware is a neglected topic sometimes, which is why we have you on to talk about hardware. For example, some people think that tape drives are old or irrelevant and that everybody should just be using cloud. Do you think that tape drives are still relevant and are they useful today?
Well, let me. I'll bring it back a little bit. Let's call it infrastructure, because when we talk about hardware, it might, you know, turn a few people off. We If we say infrastructure, it leaves it kind of broad. I like that term a lot, because infrastructure can mean, anything from the hardware to the OS to hell, even your server room. So tape drives, tape is kind of funny. Sometimes when we go and I run into a lot of Power 5 machines, if you believe that, and knocking on doors, basically being the first business partner they talk to, and God knows how long, 10, 15 years, and they've got a little Power 5 there, and they want to upgrade, and a lot of them say, hey, let's get rid of this tape drive. And my question is usually, well, why? And they say it's old. Well, tape technology is old, but it does have a place. I'm a big fan of tape, but you can also, what you really want is backup media. Okay, so what you use, it depends on your business and what you want to do, but as long as you have a piece of media that you can work from, that's the point. So tape is great because it's offline. I could take it away and put it in a tape chest, tape safe, and an LTO tape. You can put one of those on the shelf, and it'll last for 30, 40 years. It won't degrade. It's great. You can go to a virtual tape library, which is essentially, it's disk. Now, the great thing about VTLs is that you have incredible speed. So to do any type of backup and restore operation is just great going on a VTL, especially if it's SSD. It's just magical. Watching we had a customer that had their backup was something like 11 hours long, and we did a VTL with SSDs, and the thing went to something like an hour and a half. It was just ridiculous in terms of how fast the thing was. So, but the thing is, with VTLs, it's disk based, so it's electrical, and electrical doesn't like a couple of things. It doesn't like heat, and it doesn't like water. So it's sitting in your data center. So you want to make sure, if you're going to go the VTL route, that you have a secondary VTL at an offsite location or the cloud, where you can dedupe that information off and have a second copy of it somewhere. So, if you go tape, great. You go VTL or go cloud, just make sure that you've got, secondary copies of that stuff somewhere else.
Okay, so we're talking about many different methods of backup, but I guess this is kind of similar. What do you think is the most misunderstood part of hardware or storage? Is it disk space, memory? One of the most common things that I'm hearing lately is that, well, people are still worried about the amount of disk space they're still using. Do you think is that still a big deal? If it's not disk space, is there another commodity that people are so familiar with, that they aren't so familiar with, like end of service dates or moving to Power 9, just things that people should be aware of or not aware of?
Well, you mentioned two things there, and I really want to get to the end of the service dates, because that's very important. It's not misunderstood. It's just not understood. There's no misunderstanding. People are aware of those EOS dates, so I want to talk about that. But
I rambled a bit there, so
that's okay.
Yeah.
You want to redo it?
No, I think we. There's no idea.
The other one was disk space, right?
Yeah. Is okay. So, should people still be worried about disk space, or should it become like a commodity? And maybe we'll talk about end of service dates towards the end.
From a disk space perspective, like, yeah, if you're running iron that's 15 years old, one of the first shops I ever worked at, we had we had two machines. We had a 9406 270, which was our, that was the big one, and we had a little 170 that had, I think, a total of like 24 gig of disk on it. And that machine, we were spending, a good 40 minutes every day just cleaning it up, making sure it was okay, because we were, it was just stuck at this 70%, and we can't go over 75, can't go to 80, so we'd keep cleaning up every day. It was a nightmare. Nowadays, you can't buy a system. Your disk drives are like 283 gig minimum when you buy a system. That's one drive, and you're going to get 4 for RAID and 5 with a hot spare. So, you buy a new system nowadays, you've got a terabyte. And if you've got, hey, if your business has grown and you've scaled the business and your data is growing because your business is doing so well, and, you have to have all this disk and all this disk space available to you, that's great. You don't have to worry about buying any more disk drives. If you're the smaller end of the spectrum and you have a workload that hasn't changed at all really in the last 10 years, and you've moved, 2-3 machines since then, I don't see how disk can be an issue at all. If you had,
Right.
60 gig 10 years ago and you've still got 60 or 70 gig, well, that's like a fifth of a drive now.
Okay, so just before we move on to talking about end of service dates, I feel like so let's take any other hardware. I feel like disk space is almost it's a commodity. Like you can buy terabyte hard drives, plug them in, get RAID 5 going pretty for inexpensively. But I don't feel it's that way for power hardware. I mean, would you agree with that? Would you disagree with that?
The power hardware is more expensive than, going down to Staples and getting a terabyte drive?
Well, that's the question I have for you. Is it more expensive? I mean, is storage power a commodity like it is for other hardware? Yeah.
I would think that the IBM technology and the engineering that goes into these things are second to none. So, you do get what you pay for. It's like we were talking with some customers recently, or one customer in particular, that was looking to put a number of partitions on, mainstream SSDs. And these, those SSDs have a limited write capability. So they're supposed to be read intensive drives. Yeah, you can read a whole bunch on them, but they have a limited amount of writes. So you get what you pay for. If you're going to, spend less money on the low end drives, then okay, that's great. You're going to replace those drives faster than you would if you bought a, I don't want to say a proper drive, but a decent performing high end drive, or number of drives. This is the machine that's running your business. So I don't see why you wouldn't look at it as any type of other investment like insurance. Sure, you're building, you pay, whatever insurance company. You're not going down to Bob and Jim's insurance company on Main Street. Chances are you're forking out dollars, big dollars, because you want to be taken care of if you have a serious disaster. So it's like any type of insurance. You buy something that's it might seem a little bit expensive, but if you look at the power,
it's reliability. You're paying for the reliability, really, aren't you? Of buying.
Well, yeah, you're paying for the reliability, and you're paying for that the engineering that went into those things. So, and the support is still to this day, I would think, second to none as well, from a hardware perspective.
Okay. Well, that's cleared it up. So, in my last question in the blur of text that I had, you said just a second ago that end of surface dates are not understood, or they're maybe a bit misunderstood. So maybe you could just go on with that.
Yeah.
You had on that.
So yeah, the end of service dates. Yeah, it's definitely no misunderstanding. There's no understanding until people are told that there's an end of service date on the machine. It's kind of funny because if I cold call somebody up here in I don't know, Northern Ontario somewhere, and They haven't seen an IBM presentation. They're kind of cut off from the technical world. The system sits there in the back, it runs, does the job it's supposed to do, but they may not be in touch with what's going on at IBM, what's going on with new features in Power, where their current hardware currently sits. And so when you talk to somebody and say, "Hey, what do you got under the hood? What do you got? What do you got there for a machine?" And you look, and it's like a Power 720, for instance. And you say, "Oh, you realize this machine is going into service in September of this year, right?" And they say, "Nope." I say, "Oh, okay, that's great. Well, that's good. So now at least you know where you are. So you can, this is a great time to be talking about Power 9, because this is, a Power 720 is a, 9-year-old machine. It's getting long in the tooth. And these machines will run a long time, of course, but it's hardware, and hardware does fail. And the older the machine is, especially with the Power 5 and Power 6 machines that we find, Power 5, a lot of the big ones went out of support in January of this year, January 31st. Power 6s, the real popular models of Power 6 went out of support on March 30th. And I actually got a call from a guy yesterday saying, "Hey, we're ready to go." I'm thinking, okay, that's great. Let's get a move on, because you've been out of support since January. And what's really troubling is if you're caught, and we had, I had another customer that had this exact same thing happen to them. They weren't running IBM maintenance. They had no maintenance at all. And they figured they just run the box and IBM would come, they'll pay them time materials. The problem with time materials is when IBM has the time, and if and when they can get the materials to you, because you might not just have a disk drive go, you might lose a backplane. And this cat had a little box that died, and the replacement parts and the service calls that they had, minimum 4 hours, mind you, at IBM's rate. It's not cheap. That cost would have paid for their new machine had they been proactive and had it done, while the system was actually running. We had to pull a miracle to get them over to a cloud solution. And they were down for 5 days. So
it almost sounds like, while they're not aware of end of service dates, it sounds like people aren't being proactive with their hardware, and maybe even their software too.
Yeah, and I think that's, from a software perspective. We did so many upgrades last year. I think people really, they heard the message loud and clear on the software. Everybody was screaming about it, that 7.1's going away, and 7.1 was very, very popular. But you don't hear about your little Power 6 that went away, 17 days ago. And I would advise anybody just to look at the front of their machine. And if you see, if you don't see a Power 8 logo on there, then you should really just Google your machine make and model, and just get an end of service date for that thing.
Yeah. Is it that simple as well? You can just Google the machine model and it will come up pretty much. So
yeah, that's all it is. Just if you've got a Power 720 and it's a 8202 E4C. Let me make sure I got that right. 8202 E4C.
That's cool, though. I didn't think it would be that easy, but that's cool.
E4C. Yeah, so the E4C. Yeah, I got it right. I'm not a huge hardware guy, but you kind of memorize some of these part numbers. So if you see 82 E4C on your machine, well, you got a Power 720 Express, and that thing is going to go into support September 30th of this year. So you have a finite amount of time on that machine. Now, you can go to September 30th, and a couple of months beforehand, you can talk to IBM and get extended support on that. It's not going to be cheap, but you can run that hardware. I don't recommend it. Here's an example of why. So if you've got a 720, okay, well, 720 is 9 years old. So there's a finite amount of parts that IBM has for the 720. If you've got Power 6 or Power 5 hardware that just went into support, the chances of IBM pulling out a 15 to 20-year-old part, it's a little harder, right?
Yeah,
So
very.
you might be looking on eBay if you're looking for a backplane for a little 520. That's where it gets expensive.
All right. Well, I think we're running a little short on time, so I mean, I think we might hit all questions anyway. But I want to skip to one question that I know you wanted to hit on. In the news section, we mentioned rapid fire admin, which you'll be doing quick admin tips on the 24th. Do you mind giving a teaser, maybe a few tips from it or something?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are fun. I like talking about DB2 symmetric multiprocessing because that is probably the coolest feature on IBM I, especially if you have multiple cores on your IBM I partitions. So what you have with SMP is the ability to get a hell of a lot more throughput through your power cores. So if you have 3 cores in your partition, and let's say you're running 50% of your processor all day long, and you spike at 90 during the night during your evening jobs, if you enable SMP, it's 5770 SS1 option 26 of the operating system. That up, enable it, and from my experience, your processor will get a heck of a lot more throughput, and it'll kind of idle at a lower volume. So when I did that with a machine a few years ago, first time I did it, it was what 50% during the day and jacking up to 90 overnight. After enabling SMP, it would idle at around 20% during the day and jack up to 50 overnight. So you get a heck of a lot more throughput through your cores. I love that feature, and it's very, very cheap. It came out like on V3R7, but back then, if you had a multi-core machine, it was $1 million box. It was very expensive. Nowadays, you can't buy a box that's 4 cores. That's less than 4 cores. You can't. It's 4 core minimum. So everybody has the potential to be doing that sort of thing. Last little tip: I love the I call it the ambiance light. It's the attention light on the front of the machine. Yeah, so the attention light. So if it's a system that or potential customer that I've never been in before, and you go into the computer room, server room, and you can see the orange glow from a little ways back, and you ask, hey, why is your attention light on? You've got a problem. And it's like, well, it's always been on. And that's why I call it the ambiance light. Just it's on there by default. So it usually happens when a like an IBM CE comes in and replaces a disk drive, and they forget to turn off the light, go into the service action log and SST, and just clear the log and turn off the light, because that light should be the exception and not the rule. And it's important. It's one of those last little things. The first thing you notice when you look at the actual hardware, if the attention light's on, you got a problem. So we've got 148 more of those in rapid fire admin.
When is that, Steve? If you...
April 24th at 1 p.m. And I can send you guys a link of that if you want to have it, but I'm sure you can find it at itechsoul.com.
Cool.
Sure.
Okay. So I think we are slowly coming to an end, but we have a couple more. Changing the topic a little bit, what
Sure.
has been the most exciting change or maybe leap in infrastructure or hardware that you've seen in your career, and why has it been the most exciting?
From an infrastructure perspective, I would think that the advent of SSDs, and they come down in price, that anybody can really get those things. They just make systems go super fast. Makes everything run faster, makes your jobs run faster, makes your backups run faster. I can't say enough good things about SSDs. So in the next few years, spinning drives are going away. You will have to get SSDs, and that's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. So I would think that was a major advent. Hardware management console. It's just a secondary machine that lets you manage your hardware a little bit better, gives you the ability to do partitioning way easier. So if you have a a little 4-core power systems machine, and you've got 1 core allocated to IBMI. Well, you got 3 cores that you can be using for Linux, and it's not going to cost you anything. So HMC gives you the ability to spin up a Linux partition real easy, and not everybody has one. I can't recommend them enough. And you look at something like Watson and the ability for IBMI to talk to it. And you guys know what you can do with Watson. And if you look at the 30th anniversary webpage with all the customer stories of what they're doing with Watson and IBMI, it's just it's great. The thing about Watson, though, is you are only capped by your imagination. So if you're looking at your system and thinking, what can we do to facilitate this business process a little bit, make it run better, make it run faster, more intelligent? How can we leverage what you can do with Watson in order to make this mundane business process turn into an actual solution that saves you money? That's fantastic. And those are the solutions you see on that website.
All right, great. Well, we're running a little tight, so I guess we'll just skip on to our closing question for all of our talks, which is, what do you do for fun, hobbies, and passion outside of IBMI?
What I do with fun? What do I do for fun?
If you don't have any,
that?
you can tell us. Okay. If you don't have any, you can tell us.
You know what? I've got 3 kids, so they keep me real busy, and I tend to do a lot of I do a lot of carpentry around the house. I build decks, and the oddest thing about me, I think, is what really brings me to a special place. Like I hit Zen when I'm ironing clothes. I
Yep.
am most peace in the world when I'm ironing clothes. So if I'm having a really bad day, I get out the iron and I start doing pants.
Oh,
Wow.
good
Okay.
for you.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
I know who
If
to
you ever
send
imagine-
I'm not right in the head.
If you're ever mad, Steve, I've got a bunch of clothes I need ironing. So.
Well, I was gonna say, are you gonna be a common? Or, could use some help with
I won't be a
things
common.
like
I'll be a power up. Will you be a power up?
Oh, I guess I'll be. Okay.
Shots
Ouch.
fired.
Okay.
Ooh.
Hey, I'm on the board. I've got to educate. Got to make sure people are not going to common. We're going to power up.
Yeah, fair enough.
Blimey.
All right. Well,
Shots fired.
It's all good. It takes time, like IBMI.
I didn't know anyone called it that anymore.
We're not going to go there. We're not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Well, it was very good to have Steve on, and it was actually interesting because I, as a software guy, I often don't get to have the hardware conversation, and my knowledge of power hardware is not as high as I would like it to be. But this has been fairly useful to me, especially the whole commodity disk space conversation. That was pretty interesting to have.
yeah, I was gonna say when I was kind of forming the questions early on with Steve before we kind of were doing a pre-discussion, and I had actually formed my tape drives question originally as tape drives were bad, and Steve had corrected me. So I thought it was interesting to go from that point of view of defending the older techniques as still being very relevant.
Yeah, he makes a good point of it. So if it works, it works, right?
Yep.
So
yeah. So I like his perspective. That's why we had him on, and hopefully we'll keep on having all these exciting guests joining us.
Yep, and I feel like now we this may be a good time to mention that we eventually plan on having other topics that are more than just IBMI in the future. I'm not saying we're not going to give any definite date.
Oh right, yeah.
Something that I would like for us to span into, and me and Josh have obviously spoken about this, but I think we're going to try and get some topics on IBM Z. I think I actually have some guests in mind for that as well, Josh.
Right.
We're also going to get some we're going to get some software developers that are non-IBMI related or IBM Z related.
That are just not even in the IBM ecosystem. We'd like to get their perspectives.
So we have some things in the long-term plan. But I mean, the idea of having these guests, sort of like the non-IBM ecosystem kind of guests, is to see what they do and see what the comparison is like, from our industry to theirs and how they could work together in the future kind of thing. It's kind of what I had in mind for that. So that's always exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely some great stuff in store for the future.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear about that stuff, make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms.
Yeah. And with that being said,
Just a quick
yeah,
plug.
I mean, we can plug it. It's our podcast, right? We can plug it. So it's okay.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I guess that brings it to an end. Episode 5. Yeah, great. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and see you around.
So yeah.